Mom, Christmas is coming. Why don't you come back? The whole family's waiting for you. Michael's voice crackled through the phone, deliberately warm, almost rehearsed. It carried a note of exaggerated cheer like a salesman trying too hard. This was my son, my flesh and blood, yet the voice felt foreign, nearly unrecognizable. I was sitting alone in my Los Angeles apartment, winter sunlight spilling in through the tall windows, thin and pale like a memory. My fingers curled tighter around the phone. It had been 26 years. 26 years of silence. And this was the first time he called. Not for a birthday. Not for Mother's Day. Not even to check in. Just, out of nowhere. Asking me to come home. What a joke. I can't, I said, steady and flat, working hard to keep my voice emotionless. I've got things to take care of. He didn't seem to hear the chill in my tone, or he pretended not to. Come on, Mom, don't be like that. Dad said if you're willing to come back we can put the past behind us. And spending the holidays alone? That's just sad. I let out a soft laugh, sharp and bitter. How generous of him. Why don't you ask your dad who threw me out in the first place? Who was sneaking around with that woman? And who ripped you out of my arms like I was some stranger? There was a pause on the other end. Just long enough to feel the discomfort. Then awkwardly Michael said, Mom, can't we just forget about all that? What matters now is that we're family. Besides, I heard your old apartment was part of that downtown redevelopment project. Did you end up getting a payout? And there was the real reason. So much for a family reunion. My voice turned to ice. Yes, I did. Why do you ask? Been keeping tabs on me. He rushed in, trying to sound wounded. No, Mom, it's not like that. It's just, my fiancé and I are getting married. And well, the housing market is insane. We can't even scrape together a down payment. If you could help us out just a little, it'd mean the world. I felt the blood drain from my fingertips. So I kept my tone calm. Michael, how many times have you called me in the last 26 years? Have you ever stopped by? Checked if I was still breathing? And now what? You suddenly remember you have a mother? Because my bank balance got a little fatter. He sighed, impatient. Mom, don't be so harsh. I'm trying here, okay? You help us with the down payment and I swear I'll come visit all the time. I inhaled slowly, deeply, pressing the rage back down. Let me be very clear, Michael. Not a single cent of that money is going to you. I earned it. I survived for 26 years. Alone. That money is mine. You don't get to swoop in now and make a claim just because you decided to pick up the phone. I'm your son, he snapped, his voice rising. How can you do this to me? Son. My laugh came out hollow. Where were you when I needed a son? When I had nothing and no one? You don't get to use that word now. You want my money? Keep dreaming. You, your father, none of you are getting a dime. And with that I hung up. For a moment I sat there motionless on the sofa, feeling like the air had been knocked out of me. Then the tears came, hot, fast and silent. Not from sadness, but from rage. Rage that they still dared to wave the flag of family, like it meant something. Rage that, even after all this time, some foolish, desperate part of me had hoped that call meant something real. The phone rang again. My palms, just dried off, began to sweat all over. Caller ID, Richard Carter. I stared at the familiar name for a few seconds, then finally pressed answer. If you've got something to say, say it. I tried to keep my voice level even though I knew, no matter how much time had passed, hearing his voice never failed to stir something in me. Helen, don't be like this, he said, that same phony softness lacing his tone. We've been divorced for years, sure, but we still have a son, right? He's getting married soon. Maybe you could help him out, chip in for a house or something. Help him. I let out a cold laugh. Richard, you've got some nerve. Who was it that kicked me out of the house all those years ago? Who slammed the door in my face with our 3-year-old son in his arms? Now that I've got a little money, suddenly I'm your ex-wife, again? His tone shifted, sharper now, pushing past the pleasantries. Helen, that was a long time ago. Why keep dragging it up? Besides, you're not getting any younger. It's not like you need all that money. Why not just? I cut him off. You haven't changed. Still shameless. Listen closely because I'm only going to say this once. You're not getting a penny. Don't even think about it. I didn't wait for a response. I hung up. The phone landed with a dull thud on the sofa cushion. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled a long, heavy breath. Outside, the sunset was in full bloom, but inside me it was all gray clouds and thunder. And just like that, my mind slipped back to that night, 26 years ago. It was a freezing winter evening, rain pouring down in sheets. I was kneeling on the front steps of our old house, the concrete soaked through, chilling me to the bone. Richard stood just inside the doorway, holding little Michael in his arms. Michael could barely speak back then. Richard's face was blank, cold, unreadable. "You're useless," he said flatly, like reading from a script. "You can't even take care of a child. From this moment on, you're out. Don't bother coming back. I won't let you see him again. Give it up." My face was drenched in tears, my voice raw and shaking. "You can't do this to me. You're the one who cheated. Why are you throwing me out? Why are you stealing my child?" "I cheated," he scoffed. "Looking at yourself for a second. Always a mess, always nagging, never shutting up. What man could put up with that? You brought this on yourself." Then he slammed the door. Left me out there. In the cold, in the rain. Like a dog someone couldn't even be bothered to bury. After that night I tried to pick Michael up from school. Just once. But his parents stopped me at the gate. "You're not part of this family anymore," his father's mother snapped. "You have no right to see that child." I didn't give up. I kept pushing, dragging myself into one courtroom after another, clinging to the hope that I could win back custody of my son. But hope doesn't mean much when you've got no money, no degree, no standing. He had lawyers. He had connections. He had family money. Me. In the eyes of the court, I was just a broke, unemployed housewife. Someone to be pitied, not trusted with a child. I lost. Finally. Completely. After that, I became a stranger to my own son. I moved to Los Angeles and started over, on my own. I washed dishes. Delivered takeout. Scrubbed floors in houses where people wouldn't even look me in the eye. I did everything and anything just to survive. No one ever asked how I made it through. No one cared. But I did. Because I had to. That memory has lived inside me like a tumor for over 2 decades. And every time I hear the word mom, it aches. Quietly. Persistently. I picked up my phone and called Marilyn, my closest friend, the woman who saved me when I had nothing but shattered pride and an empty apartment. "You were right, Marilyn," I said, my voice hoarse. "I can't let them sweet-talk their way back in. They're not getting a single penny. Not one." "Damn right they're not," she snapped like she was pounding the table. "Helen, you've suffered more than anyone knows. And now they think they can show up with a few fake smiles and take what's yours? Hell no." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah. I've learned something over the years. Blood doesn't guarantee love. And this time, I'm living for me." After we hung up, I stood at the window watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Los Angeles, once cold, foreign, and full of strangers, was now the only place that felt like home. And I made a promise to myself right then and there. No more bowing. No more weeping for the past. From this day forward, I would become someone entirely new. I stood by the window, a cup of cold tea cradled in my hands, staring past the balcony rail and out over the skyline. Los Angeles sunsets were always beautiful, soft gold melting into dusky pinks, but in my chest there wasn't a flicker of light. No one but me truly knew what it took to walk the road I'd been on for the last 26 years. Those first few years after the divorce were the lowest point of my life. I had nothing. No husband, no son, not even a place to sleep that felt like mine. It felt like I'd been ripped out of my own life and thrown into a world that didn't know me, didn't want me, and sure as hell didn't care. I had no degree, no work experience. The only thing I had was desperation. So I ran. I begged. I did whatever I had to do. Eventually, I landed a job washing dishes at a little corner restaurant. 10 hours a day in a grimy kitchen, my hands plunged into cold, greasy water, scrubbing plate after plate while trying to pretend I couldn't hear the whispers. "She's the one whose husband kicked her out. She couldn't even keep her own kid. What kind of mother is that?" I heard it all. I just acted like I didn't. I kept my head down and kept scrubbing, my fingers numb, my bones aching as the cold water bit into my skin. That was when I learned something crucial. The world doesn't stop for a woman who's fallen. It doesn't step aside. It doesn't offer you a hand. And just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, life showed me there was still further to fall. One night after closing, I walked down the alley behind the restaurant. It was dark, blacker than usual, and dead quiet. Out of nowhere, a group of drunk men stumbled into the alley. They started shouting crude things at me. One of them grabbed at my shirt. I fought back, clawing and shoving, but I was no match for them. I hit the pavement hard, my elbow slamming into the concrete, pain shooting through me. For a moment I thought that was it. That my story would end there, in the dark, in the dirt, unheard. Get your hands off her. That voice cut through the alley like thunder. It was Marilyn. She lived down the hall from me in our old rundown apartment building. A few years older, always had a smart mouth and a laugh that made people stare. She came flying down the alley with nothing but a broom in her hands and fire in her voice. Her shouting was louder than their fists, sharper than their stares. They didn't expect a fight. And they ran. That night everything changed. Marilyn became my person. She started bringing me dinner when I got off work. Sat with me when I couldn't find the words to talk. But the most important thing? He never pitied me. Not once. She never said, "You poor thing." She said, "You don't get to give up. You've got to stand up, Helen," she told me. "You can't let them win. You hear me? You've got to live better than they ever imagined you could." That line, those words, they nailed themselves into my heart. I didn't cry. I didn't fall again. I just told myself, survive. And then grow stronger. So I kept scrubbing dishes during the day. And at night I enrolled in community college. Took computer classes. Accounting. Time was tight. Money was tighter. But quitting? That was no longer an option. 3 years later I finally landed a job as an assistant at a small trading company. The pay wasn't great, but it meant no more dish pits, no more murky mop buckets. I thought maybe, just maybe, life was finally giving me a break. I was wrong. It had one more knife waiting for me. One afternoon outside a grocery store I saw a figure that made my heart stop. Michael. He was grown now, 10 maybe 11. A backpack slung over his shoulders. Taller than the little boy I remembered. My heart nearly leapt out of my chest. I rushed over, calling out, "Michael. Do you remember me?" He froze. Took a step back. His eyes were cautious, confused. "Who are you?" he said, brows furrowed. "My mom died years ago. Stop pretending." I stood there, rooted to the spot like I'd been struck by lightning. "Michael, sweetheart, it's me. Don't you remember? You used to beg me to make milk pancakes every Sunday morning." His face twisted with annoyance. He started to turn away. That's when I saw Richard. He was walking over with a perfectly polished woman on his arm. His face changed the second he saw me. Without hesitation he pulled Michael toward him. "Don't talk to her," he snapped. "Let's go." I didn't move. I didn't shout. I just stood there as tears streamed silently down my cheeks. My son, my child, was standing right in front of me and didn't even recognize me. Not because I'd changed, but because Richard had erased me from his world. He told him I was dead. That's what true erasure looks like. After that day I fell apart. I shut myself inside my tiny apartment, barely 100 square feet, and didn't come out for 3 days. I didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't even open the curtains. I lay in the dark, wave after wave of tears crashing over me like a storm that wouldn't end. I had fought so hard to stay alive, hoping that one day Michael would look at me and know me again. But he looked me in the eye, and called me a stranger, said I was dead. I remember curling up on the floor against the wall, his words playing on a loop in my mind. My mom died years ago. That night I thought about ending it. Not out of desperation, but calm, calculated exhaustion. I sat on the bathroom floor with the bottle in my hand. I unscrewed the cap half full with sleeping pills. I thought if no one remembers I was ever here, then maybe disappearing wouldn't matter. But just then, Marilyn came. She kicked the door open like she owned the place. Took one look at me and didn't say a word before slapping me across the face. Not hard. Just enough to snap me back. "What the hell are you doing?" she shouted, angrier than I'd ever seen her. "Have you lost your mind? You want to die and hand everything over to those two bastards on a silver platter? That's what you're doing. You die and they get it all, clean, easy, free. Is that what you want?" Every word she said felt like a blade in my chest. But I didn't cry. Somehow she'd cursed the tears right out of me. "Think about everything you've survived these past 20-something years," she said. "And now you want to quit? You're really going to let them win?" I don't remember what I said back. I just remember grabbing her, sobbing in her arms like a child. She stroked my back and whispered, "From now on you live for you. No one else." That night I was reborn. I tightened every loose thread in my soul. Cinched up my pain like a belt pulled hard. I threw myself back into work. Even the simplest order entry, I made sure every digit was perfect. I volunteered to double-check spreadsheets. Taught myself Excel formulas. Signed up for night classes in global trade. 3 years. In 3 years I went from a nameless assistant to a department manager. My salary tripled. I moved into a decent apartment. For the first time I walked into a custom tailor and bought myself a suit. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at a woman with clean makeup and eyes like steel. And I barely recognized her. But I wasn't done. I enrolled in the University of California's evening program, majoring in international trade. Worked by day. Studied by night. Spent weekends attending open lectures, squeezed between kids half my age, scribbling notes like my life depended on it. Sometimes I'd stretch 1 cup of coffee across 2 days, just to finish another chapter. Hard work pays off. 10 years later I stood in my own office, holding the business license for HC Global Trade Inc. I was 45 years old. I had built my own trading company from the ground up. From washing dishes to managing million-dollar contracts. It took me 20 years. The first thing I did after launching the company was pay off my debts. The second, I bought a house. Just for me. No shared deed. No man's name on the papers. Just mine. Helen Carter. I had never felt so dignified in my life. For the first time I started to believe. Maybe, just maybe, life was finally ready to give something back. Last Christmas, just weeks before the holidays, my company received a notice of government compensation. It was for that crumbling house I bought more than 20 years ago in East Los Angeles. The one with faulty heating and peeling paint. I had almost forgotten about it. But the city hadn't. It was seized as part of an urban renewal project, and the payout was listed right there in black and white. $500,000. I remember laughing out loud the moment I saw the number. After everything, fate actually remembered me. Remembered my suffering. I'd planned to use the money to expand my business and maybe finally buy myself a little seaside cottage for retirement. But before I could finish drafting the plan, the ghosts of my past came crawling back. Michael called first, weaving together words like family, togetherness, and the holidays. 2 days later, Richard followed up with a call of his own, playing the "We Share a Child" card, pleading with me to help out for old time's sake. I listened to the syrupy rehearsed tones on the other end and couldn't help but let out a low, bitter laugh. The kind that comes when you've seen through every lie. When you've survived enough betrayal to recognize the pattern. I hung up and immediately sent Marilyn a text. You were right. Not a single one of them deserves forgiveness. They thought I was still soft. That I could still be guilt, manipulated, moved. But the Helen they remember died years ago. In a damp kitchen and a dark alleyway. And my revenge? It was just getting started. I'm not impulsive. I'm strategic. And this time I wasn't just aiming to protect myself. I wanted to make sure there would never be a second chance for them to sink their claws into my life. So the first thing I did was call my lawyer friend, Clara. A top-tier estate attorney with over 2 decades of experience in Los Angeles. We met in her office, the scent of roasted coffee lingering in the air as she calmly laid out the options. Helen, she said, if you draft a formal will today and clearly state that all of your assets are to be donated, excluding Michael entirely, even if he tries to contest it in the future, he won't stand a chance. It's your full legal right. I nodded. That very evening, with Clara as my witness, I signed my will. All of it, my cash, my properties, my shares in the company, was to go to the Phoenix Rising Foundation, a nonprofit I built from the ground up. Its mission, to support women like me, survivors of domestic abuse and marital betrayal. As my pen hit the final line, I heard the sound of a metaphorical iron gate slamming shut. Not on me, but on everyone who ever tried to steal from my life. And still I wasn't done. Financial punishment was one thing. I wanted consequences. Public ones. Years of building my business had given me a wide network. So I started asking around, quietly. And it didn't take long to get a full picture of Richard's life. Turns out karma had done some of the work for me. He'd spiraled, gambling addiction, crushing debt. The woman he cheated with? Long gone. Now he was surviving on scraps of Social Security, living in a crumbling subsidized apartment on the outskirts of LA. A poetic downfall. But not enough. I dug deeper and tracked down the retired judge who handed Richard that custody win years ago. He lived a quiet life now, kept a low profile. But fate loves symmetry. His only son worked for one of my subsidiaries. I invited the judge to meet me. Neutral territory, a quiet little restaurant with nothing but the hum of a coffee machine and the occasional rush of traffic outside. I didn't waste time. I know what Richard paid you, I said, smiling without warmth. And I know exactly how to make sure your son's career here comes to a very sudden stop. But if you tell the truth about what happened, I might be willing to let that slide. His face shifted, anger, fear, denial. Then finally, resignation. He sighed. Yes, he said quietly. I took the money. And the fake documents. Those were Richard's idea. He asked me to cooperate. And I did. That was all I needed. Clara compiled the statements and documents into a thick legal complaint and filed it alongside a formal ethics report with the California Judicial Review Board. The hammer came down fast. Richard's life, already in ruins, was about to go up in flames. Within weeks, the court summons landed at his door. On the day of the trial, I walked into the courtroom wearing a tailored navy blue suit. Controlled. Every inch the woman they thought I'd never become. Richard was led in, hunched over, eyes dull and aimless. A ghost of the man he once was. The judge read the charges aloud in a crisp, cold voice. Richard Carter, you are under formal investigation for bribery and evidence tampering related to a custody ruling issued 26 years ago. Do you contest these charges? Richard trembled, lips pale, eyes wide. I confess, he whispered. Please have mercy. I didn't have a choice back then. I stared at him. No pity. Just clarity. When it was my turn to speak, I stood at the witness stand and looked straight through him. 26 years ago he threw me out of my own home, I said, my voice steady and cutting. He took my child. He used lies and money to destroy my life. I paused, let the silence stretch. Today I just want him to know. Justice doesn't forget. Richard collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Helen, I was wrong. Please forgive me. I looked down at him, cold smile curling on my lips. Forgive you, I said, tilting my chin. You think that's even on the table? You should get used to the taste of ruin. I lived with it for decades. The court overturned the original ruling, clearing my name of all past accusations. Richard was sentenced to 3 years in prison, 5 years probation, and ordered to pay $200,000 in emotional damages. When I stepped out of that courthouse, the Los Angeles sun was golden, warm on my face. I inhaled deeply and felt the weight of 26 years finally lift. I had won. And I won using the two things they worshipped most: power and money, to crush them completely. But I knew my story wasn't over. There was one chapter left. One person I still owed closure to. Michael. My son. The boy I once lived for, worked myself to the bone for, swallowed humiliation and pain for. But he wasn't that boy anymore. He hadn't been for a long time. He had become a shadow of Richard. No worse. I hired a private investigator. Not the kind who lurks in parking lots chasing cheating spouses. A former FBI contract analyst who specialized in corporate fraud and high-level deception. It didn't take long. Soon I had a thick folder on my desk. Michael had been living off women. 4 women in 4 different cities had transferred him tens of thousands of dollars. Each time he told the same story. A failed business. A sick mother. A mortgage crisis. He was a predator. A professional manipulator who harvested trust like a crop. Even worse, he was living a double or rather triple life. 2 women believed they were his fiancées. One of them had already started posting bridal fitting photos online. I sat in my office flipping through those pages, each line stabbing deeper into my chest. But I didn't cry. I made copies. One for each woman. Anonymous envelopes. Inside each, the report and a single note handwritten by me. You deserve a cleaner future. I also filed an anonymous complaint with the California Bureau of Financial Fraud, attaching a full evidence chain. Less than a week later I got a response. Case accepted. And then, it started. It was a Friday. I had just wrapped a conference call when my phone rang. Michael. I picked up. My voice was calm. Heard you've been having a rough time lately? His tone was different. Soft, uncertain, even hopeful. Mom? You finally answered. He let out a laugh that bordered on relief. Yeah, things have gotten kinda bad. But I was wondering if you could maybe lend me some money? Just for a bit. I really need help right now. I leaned back in my chair, smiled coldly. Michael, what did you think I was all these years? I reached out. I tried. Time and again I tried to rebuild something with you. You shut the door in my face every single time. I was nothing to you. Now you need cash and suddenly I'm your mother again. He panicked. The desperation cracked through his voice. Mom, please, I know I messed up. I do. I swear I'll make it up to you. Just, please, give me one more chance. I drew in a deep breath, running my fingers along the smooth edge of the phone. Then I said, too late. You're the one who threw me away, Michael. And now you'll live with the consequences. I only picked up this call to say one thing. Don't ever call me again. And I hung up. Without hesitation. And for the first time, I felt nothing. No ache. No guilt. No sadness. Just silence. And peace. Michael was eventually charged with multiple counts of fraud. The media picked up the story and soon his name and face were plastered across the front page of every local news outlet. His professional reputation crumbled. Whatever image he'd built for himself dissolved overnight. In the end, he paid the price for everything he'd done. Meanwhile, my life had quietly reached new heights. My company expanded into New York and Chicago. We closed several seven-figure contracts and became one of the leading names in the industry. For the first time in my life, I had the power to choose who I wanted to work with. I had the freedom to say no. But the moment I truly felt healed didn't come from any bank balance or award. It came from watching other women rise. Because of me. I founded the Phoenix Rising Foundation with one simple mission. To make sure no woman ever had to go through what I did. No woman should be thrown out of her home, forgotten by her child, or ridiculed over a sink full of dishes while being called washed up. I wanted to give them options. I wanted to give them power. We offered emergency housing, legal aid, trauma therapy, and free job training programs. For many of these women, it was the first time they realized they had a choice. 5 winters later, I sat on my balcony in Santa Barbara, a cup of warm mulled wine in hand. Snow dusted the mountains in the distance. A rare California snowfall glowing soft under the sunset. I wore a cream cashmere shawl. At my feet, my old cat basked lazily in the sun. A letter lay beside me on the table, just delivered by my assistant. It was from the Los Angeles Social Contribution Council. I'd been named the recipient of that year's Philanthropist of the Year award. At the ceremony, standing beneath the lights on stage, I looked out over the audience. More than 100 women who had once been ignored, silenced, discarded by the world. And suddenly my eyes filled with tears. As I had always known. My success was never just about clawing my way out of hell. It was about reaching back. And pulling someone else up with me. It was about showing those women what I had finally learned. You can choose not to forgive. And you can also choose to begin again. That afternoon, sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows as I sat reviewing a new proposal for a community shelter project. My housekeeper approached quietly. "Miss Carter," she said softly, "you have a call." I picked up the phone. The name on the screen was one I'd deleted more times than I could count. But it still looked familiar. Still made my breath catch for a second. "Michael." I paused. Then pressed answer. "Mom." His voice cracked. Fragile, hesitant, like it had traveled a long way just to reach me. "Hi, sweetheart," I replied gently. "Mom, I know I don't deserve this. I've thought a lot during those years in prison. I regret everything. Every word. Every lie. Every time I hurt you. I'm out now. I got a job, a small sales gig. Nothing fancy. I'm trying. Would you meet me? Just once." I closed my eyes. Drew in a breath. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what I felt. I didn't answer him. I just hung up the phone and sat in silence on the couch. That night I barely slept. Even with the thick curtains pulled shut, I couldn't block out the voice echoing in my head. "Mom, it's me." Michael's voice was older. Weighed down. Each word laced with a guilt that sounded real. And for the first time in years I stared at the ceiling until dawn. The sunlight touched my bedsheets before I finally stirred. I didn't call him back. Instead, I wrote a letter. Each word slow, deliberate. Like my heart still needed armor. It reads, Michael, if you want a chance, sit down and tell me the truth. Not for your sake. Not even for mine. But because someone somewhere has to teach you what it means to take responsibility for the things you've done. I'll be at the Mildred Street Cafe near my house. Friday, 2 p.m. sharp. If you're late, I'll leave. Your mother. Helen. That day I wore something bright on purpose. An orange wool coat Marilyn had given me for my birthday last year. You need to stop hiding in the colors of your past, she had said. No more gray. Mildred Street Cafe was an old spot. Nothing fancy. The tables were a little scuffed, the wooden chairs creaked if you sat too long. But the air was always clean and it was never too loud. That's what I liked about it. I arrived 30 minutes early. Ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and set it down across from me. For him. At exactly 2 o'clock he walked through the door. I recognized him, but it took a moment. His hair was cropped short and he looked thinner, sharper around the edges. His jacket was faded, the kind of fabric that had been washed 100 times. His knuckles were red and raw, like he'd been lifting things without gloves. We locked eyes for a second. Then he walked over. He didn't sit right away. He stood in front of me, looking small in a way I hadn't seen since he was 10 years old and got caught lying about a broken vase. Careful. I pointed at the coffee. He whispered a thank you and sat down slowly. For several minutes we said nothing. The air between us felt thick, like cotton. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and slow. He spoke first. Mom, I've really changed. His voice was quiet, hoarse. I spent a lot of time in prison thinking. Writing letters I never had the guts to send. I nodded, said nothing. I've got a job now, sales. Entry level. But I'm trying, I swear I am. I haven't lied. Haven't taken a single cent that wasn't mine. So I didn't respond. Just tapped my finger against the rim of my cup. Soft, even beats. I know I was awful. I lied to you. I lied to everyone. But I want to be someone you can be proud of. I finally looked up. His eyes were damp, blinking too fast. Michael, I said quietly. The woman sitting in front of you today? She took 26 years to build. You don't get to undo that with 3 nice sentences and a cup of coffee. He bit his lip and didn't argue. I sighed, letting my voice soften. I didn't come here to forgive you. I came to ask if you're ready to truly face what you've done. He nodded. Hard. His eyes were red now. I reached into my bag and pulled out a hard-covered notebook. I slid it across the table. If you're serious, write. Each week send me something. A memory, a reflection. No embellishments. No excuses. Just the truth. As it was. His hands trembled as he took the notebook. Then he looked up at me. And for the first time, there was a flicker of light in his eyes. I didn't promise him anything. But in that moment, I felt it. The first plank laid on a bridge. Not back to what we had. But toward something new. Something rebuilt. I stood up to leave. He stood with me. And as I turned, he said softly, "Thank you." I didn't look back. But I knew he'd come next time. Not to ask for forgiveness. But to try finally. To become someone a mother could see. Michael didn't miss the meeting. 1 week later, just before sunset, he showed up right on time at my front porch, notebook in hand. He was still dressed plainly, but something about him looked more put together. His hair was trimmed, his shirt ironed. He stood there, cautious but with a quiet determination in his eyes. I didn't invite him in. I simply took the notebook from his hand. His fingers trembled as he passed it to me. I didn't open it right then. I just nodded. "If you want to keep writing," I said, "we can schedule another time." "I want to," he replied. Then he left. I stood on the porch and watched him walk away. There wasn't relief in my chest. Just a weight I couldn't quite name. But it wasn't the old anger. It was something else. A guardedness, maybe. A kind of caution that comes when something once broken tries to be whole again. As family. Once torn open. Can't be stitched back together with a single, "I'm willing." Later that night I read what he'd written. He described the first time he heard the words, "Your mom is dead." He was just a child sitting at the dinner table. When Richard, beer in hand, tossed it out like a weather update. Michael didn't cry. He just accepted it. Likely. He wrote about 3rd grade. How a woman he didn't recognize showed up at the school gate and handed him a stuffed bunny. He said he panicked. Ran home. Only to be punished harshly. Richard told him she was a bad woman. told him never to talk to her again. From that day on, Michael said, a strange feeling took root inside him. Fear, confusion, and a quiet aching sense that he'd lost something. He didn't even understand. He didn't try to justify any of it. He just wrote, awkward but honest, about what it meant to grow up steeped in lies. How over time love for a mother he barely remembered hardened into something else. When I closed the notebook, I couldn't quite name the feeling it left in me. It wasn't joy. It wasn't sorrow. It was something softer. Something that sounded like understanding. For the first time, I saw clearly how he had been led, step by step, away from me. I placed the notebook on the dining table, left the light on. I didn't sleep well that night, but it was better than the time before. The second time we met, it was a Saturday afternoon. He asked if we could sit by the bench near the downtown library. The sun was warm, the streets quiet. I brought a bottle of lemon water. He brought a book on sales strategies. Mom, he said as we settled in, I'm not asking you to trust me right away. I just want to become someone you could maybe, eventually, believe in. I nodded. I told him we needed boundaries. No money. No co-signing anything. No moving in. This isn't punishment, I explained. It's protection. For both of us. Space to breathe. He nodded. I get it. I added, I'll read what you write. But I won't always respond. He smiled. That's more response than I've had in the last 20 years. That afternoon we talked for 2 whole hours. We talked about his job, the difficult clients, the demanding boss. We talked about his mornings, how he forces himself out of bed, starts the day by washing his face, then writes in his journal for 10 minutes. He told me he's begun ending every day by listing 3 things he didn't mess up. Even if it's something small like, clocked in on time. Or, didn't lie to myself about not being hungry and eat junk food. I said, sounds like you've finally started talking to yourself. He smiled. Yeah, he said, I think I'm finally hearing my own voice. And in that moment, a warmth crept into my chest. Not joy, but a flicker of trust. The kind that doesn't rush in, but thaws slowly, like frost at the edge of a winter window. I didn't say it out loud. But as I walked home, I found myself already looking forward to next week. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, the next meeting day arrived. That evening I cooked dinner, something I hadn't done in a long time. Pan-seared salmon, steamed asparagus, and a small pot of pumpkin soup. Not because I'd forgotten how to cook, but because for years, I hadn't felt there was anyone worth cooking for. I even changed the tablecloth. A deep navy cotton linen, paired with simple white ceramic dishes. The pendant lights overhead cast a warm golden glow across the room. It was quiet, peaceful. At exactly 6 o'clock the doorbell rang. I dried my hands and went to open the door. Michael stood there holding a bouquet of sunflowers, looking nervous. I remember you used to like sunflowers, he said. I wasn't sure if you still do. I took the flowers, nodded. Thank you. No small talk. No dramatics. Just a quiet welcome. I asked him to take off his shoes and come inside. He moved cautiously, still gripping that notebook like a lifeline. His posture stiff, every step careful. This is a kitchen, not a courtroom, I said. Relax a little. He let out a tight laugh and sat at the table. As I brought out the dishes, he commented, smells amazing. That color looks great. Too eager. The kind of compliments that stretch a little too far. Trying too hard to find something to say. When we started eating, he took a sip of soup, then paused. I haven't had a home-cooked meal in years, he said. I replied quietly, neither have I. For a second the air dropped. But only for a second. I changed the subject and told him about a women's job training program I'd recently visited. Michael listened closely, asked a few thoughtful questions about operations. I could tell he was trying to sound useful. Halfway through dinner he stopped, looked at me and asked, Mom, can I ask you something? I nodded. Did you really come to see me when I was little? At school. I paused. Set my spoon down gently. I did, I said. Many times. I stood outside the gate and watched you run out of class holding your dad's hand getting into the car. You never looked back. He lowered his head. Said nothing for a long moment. Dad told me you didn't want to see me. But I know now, he never told me you came. My voice stayed even, unshaken. Those memories were old enough now to speak of plainly. He told me you were crazy. Said you died. Said you ran off with the family money. That you left us. He gave me a dozen different versions of you. His voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't say anything. Just gave him space. Let him say what needed to be said. I believed him for a long time. But when I got older, sometimes I wondered. If you were really that terrible, why did I get birthday cards every year? I smiled, soft and tired. I thought you never opened them. There were a few I kept. Hid them. Didn't want anyone to know. I think I was too scared to find out the truth. It was easier to believe you were the bad one than to accept I'd been lied to my whole life. I nodded. I understand. He didn't say anything else. Just quietly went back to eating. But something had shifted. His movements softer, more natural. Like a thin layer of frosted glass had finally cracked. After dinner I brewed jasmine tea. He said the smell reminded him of when he was sick as a child. The only memory he had of me, he said, was from a cup of slightly bitter, slightly sweet tea. I remember you held me. I had a fever. Dad was out of town, no one else was home. You wore a gray sweater. You sat beside my bed and blew on my medicine. I hadn't expected him to recall that. It was the only time I'd managed to sneak in and care for him while Richard was away. The last time I was allowed anywhere near him. We sat on the sofa in silence, sipping tea. Outside the sky had gone dark. Street lights spilled through the windows, slanting across the coffee table. And for the first time in a long time, this house, this quiet little space, felt like home. When he stood to leave, I walked him to the door. He turned to face me, hesitating, like he wanted to say something more. I've been looking for something to do, he said. Not a job. Something that might help people. I'm not sure I'll be any good at it. But I want to try. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, if you're serious, check out Phoenix. It's not perfect. But it's worth it. He didn't mention it again after that day. And I didn't ask. Until Friday, when I opened a routine update email from one of the foundation's coordinators. Just a list of new volunteers and program shifts. I scrolled absent-mindedly. Then froze. Michael Carter. Completed introductory volunteer training. Currently assisting with intake and orientation support. I stared at the screen for a moment, then smiled. He hadn't told me. And that was exactly what I'd hoped for. He took the step himself. Not waiting for me to clear the way. Not because I led him there. But because for once, he wanted to walk it on his own. Saturday morning, I arrived early at the foundation's office. I pretended I was just passing through, casually stepped into the training room. Michael was there, standing in front of 3 new female volunteers, walking them through the intake process. His movements were a little clumsy, but his tone was steady, focused. He was taking notes as he spoke, pausing to make sure they understood. When he spotted me, there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes. But no panic. Just a small nod. Then he went right back to what he was doing. I sat in the back and listened for a while. After he wrapped up and sent the women off with warm goodbyes, he walked over and sat beside me. You knew I'd be here? He asked. Not before today, I smiled. But the fact that you didn't tell me, it tells me you wanted to do this on your own. He lowered his head and smiled. And in that smile I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Confidence. Earned, not borrowed. I just didn't want you to worry about me anymore, he said. I nodded. In the weeks that followed, I saw the change more clearly. When he came over for dinner, he started bringing new recipes to try. He no longer waited to be served. He helped. He washed dishes. He wiped counters without being asked. He started talking about the future. Not in vague some days, but in clear plans. I'm thinking of taking a management course, he said one evening. Might be useful if the foundation expands some of its programs. Then he volunteered for a job placement initiative for domestic violence survivors. His task: organizing files, making calls to community centers. But one day the program director pulled me aside. She told me Michael had spent 2 hours just talking with a 50-year-old woman in the program. She cried, the director said. She said, I never imagined a man would sit and actually listen to my story all the way through. Michael didn't mention it to me. He simply came over that evening, placed his notebook on the table and said, I didn't write a story this week. Just 3 names. And 3 things they told me. I opened the notebook. The first page read, "You are stronger than you think." We didn't eat dinner that night. We drank tea instead. At one point he looked up and asked, "Mom, how did you get through it all in the beginning?" I was quiet for a while. Then I said, "I didn't get through it. I stumbled the whole way." He nodded slowly. "I get that." And I could tell he wasn't just saying it. He meant it. It wasn't sympathy. It was resonance. He was beginning to understand that living doesn't mean escaping pain. It means walking forward with it anyway. That night as he stood to leave, I walked him to the door. He hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged me. Not like a child needing comfort, but like a man, finally lowering his defenses, choosing closeness. I hugged him back and patted his back lightly. "Don't be late for work tomorrow," I said with a grin. He laughed. "I won't disappoint you." When the door closed behind him, I stood there for a moment, looking down the quiet hallway. And in that stillness, I realized life was getting better. That afternoon the sun was soft and golden. Michael came over for lunch as usual, but this time he brought a proposal. "I reached out to a care home in Berkeley," he said as he set his jacket down. "They're running a Mother's Day volunteer program. I heard someone you used to know lives there. I think you mentioned her once." I paused, caught off guard. "Rita?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah. You said she was the only person you could really talk to back when things were hardest." I remembered. A quiet ripple stirred inside me, old, distant, but familiar. Rita had been my neighbor during those years in the low-income housing unit. A fiery, no-nonsense Latina woman who always smelled of chili and laughed with her whole body. She was blunt, loud, and loyal. After she fell ill, she moved to Berkeley and we lost touch. That day, Michael and I drove 2 hours to the care home. We found Rita sitting in the garden, sunning herself by the courtyard wall. Her face was pale, but her smile burst open like a firecracker when she saw me. She gripped my hand with the same fierce strength I remembered. "You must be the boy," she said, squinting at Michael. "The one who wouldn't open the door while your mother cried in the courtyard. I wanted to kick your father straight in the teeth back then." Michael gave an awkward laugh but didn't flinch. "I know I missed a lot," he said quietly. Rita raised an eyebrow. "So, you think you can make it up?" He looked her dead in the eye and nodded. "I want to try." I looked at the two of them, one my anchor when I had none, the other once the deepest wound in my life. Now they sat on either side of me. We spent the afternoon there, chatting, laughing, mostly listening to Rita's unstoppable commentary. On the drive home, the sun was setting. Michael and I didn't speak for most of the ride. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just full. As we pulled into the driveway, he broke it. "Mom," he said, "was there ever a moment when you really wanted to erase me from your life?" I didn't answer right away. "There was," I said softly. He turned to look at me, his face calm. "It was when you were 17, I said. "The last time I stood outside your house. You glanced at me through the window, then closed the curtain." I turned my face to the fading orange sky. I remember going home and lying on my bed thinking, maybe it's time to erase you from my heart. Maybe I should let go. "And why didn't you?" he asked. "Because I couldn't," I whispered. The car sat still in the driveway, unmoving. Neither of us made a move to get out. "You know," I continued, "before you closed the curtain, you hesitated for half a second. I never forgot that." He bowed his head. His voice was hoarse. "In that half second, I was wondering if you'd leave." I looked at him. "I never left. I just stayed in place until you turned around." That night we didn't eat dinner. We didn't say goodbye. He just reached out and held my hand. A simple gesture. Quiet. Then he drove off. I stood in the doorway, watching the glow of his taillights disappear down the street. And for the first time I felt the weight of all those years. The ache, the anger, the waiting. Lift. Gently. Without fanfare. A few weeks later, Michael invited me to the Phoenix Foundation's annual gala. He stood with the other volunteer representatives wearing a charcoal gray suit. There was no nervous smile, no exaggerated politeness. Just a quiet steadiness. And for the first time I didn't see someone trying to be good. I saw someone becoming whole. He didn't speak much. But when he said, "Rebuilding closeness is the longest, hardest journey, but the most worthwhile," I saw a woman in the crowd nod quietly, and my own eyes filled with tears. After the event, we walked home together. He carried his suit jacket over one arm and said, "I was nervous today, but I didn't feel like I was speaking just for me." "I know," I replied. "You were speaking for a lot of mothers. And a lot of sons." The wind picked up. He offered me the jacket. I shook my head, smiling. "You keep it. I'm not cold." He nodded and kept walking. The moonlight stretched across the sidewalk in silver stripes. We walked side by side, like two people who finally understood the terrain of each other's hearts. The regret, the silence, the distance. They still existed, but they no longer defined us. Michael was no longer my shame, no longer my guilt. He was simply my son, and I could finally say with pride and peace, I am his mother. This reunion, though long overdue, was one we both showed up for, fully.